Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What's going on, guys? It is TNT Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NFL edition, AFC West coverage. With me, as always, is the fine citizen, Mr. Jacob Workman. Jake, how's it going, man?
It's going good. How's everything going?
Oh, not too bad. Ready to get things going here. We talk about it in the NCAA episode that we've got some actual real life football that's coming up on the college side of the equation. We've already got some preseason games happening. On the NFL side, we've actually seen some starters play in these past couple games. I caught a little bit of the Texans-Steelers matchup last night. Saw the Justin Fields center connection needs a little bit of work. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm happy to start seeing some live football. I don't know if you've had a chance to catch any of the preseason action yet.
Yeah, the Lions played already. I watched the Lions game, which was uneventful. Nate Sudfeld is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, what was the quote you sent me about Nate Sudfeld?
I believe I said I could put a football in my asshole and shoot it out, and it would be more accurate than Nate Sudfeld.
Yeah, that's a interesting quote, to say the least. How did Hendon Hooker look?
He looked awesome until he decided to try to be the human bulldozer. He did plow a guy over, but in the process got himself a concussion. So he'll probably be out for the rest of the preseason. But in the little that we saw, he's definitely better than Sudfeld.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I didn't get a chance to catch any of it, but I talked last year a little bit how I'm kind of excited to see what Hendon Hooker's going to be able to do as he gets healthy and is able to start playing. So anyway, all right, let's move into it here, guys. We've got a lot to cover here on the AFC West side of the equation. We are going to start with the Los Angeles Chargers. They experienced a pretty highly disappointing season by all accounts last year. They started the season 4-4 through the first 9 weeks of the year, including an early week 5 bye. Their 27-6 victory over the Aaron Rodgers-less Jets in New York would prove to be a highlight win for their season, however, as the team went on to finish the year losing 8 of their last 9 games. The only win they were able to get in those final 9 wasn't a pretty one either, as they only beat the Pats 6-0 in a game where the leading rusher, Austin Eckler, had 18 total yards. Particularly devastating blow came in week 14 when Herbert suffered a broken finger, forcing him to miss the rest of the season. The team's offensive output declined noticeably in his absence, highlighting his impact on the Chargers' success. Easton Stick took over after Herbert's injury, but was never really able to gain a win for the Chargers. They had a particularly ugly loss in Vegas against the Raiders, where they got beat 63-21. LA struggled with consistency throughout the year, particularly on the ground. The team didn't have a 100-yard rusher in a single game outside of their week 1 loss against the Dolphins. They displayed a unique inability to close out games. They lost 7 contests by 3 points or less. That trend underscored a real lack of execution in some of the more crucial moments and inability to overcome adversity. Some of that adversity was the injury bug. Justin Herbert, we talked about Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, Josh Palmer, Mike Williams. All those guys had injuries at some point in 2024 that kept them out for some games down the stretch. They finished the year 5-12 and placed 4th in the AFC West. This marked a significant regression from the previous year's 10-7 finish. They finished tied for 22nd on offense and ranked 20th on defense, according to PFF, while finishing 21st in the league in points scored and 24th in points allowed. Ultimately, 23 season was a pretty major setback for the Chargers and triggered the ownership to hit the reset button. Both the third-year head coach Brandon Staley and 10th-year GM Tom Telesco were let go as the Chargers start to rebuild in a number of areas. Jake, what are your thoughts on the performance of the Chargers in 2023? And I hope you appreciate the mascot we have here, since the Bolts don't have an official one.
Yeah, I like the super fan lady. I don't know. It's an interesting season.
For what it's worth, I also put Derwin James on here.
I see Derwin over there. Should have put Asante with him. So Khalil Mack, I had him as a bright spot, 17 sacks. Keenan Allen had a good year. He had 1,243 yards, 7 touchdowns. But like you kind of said, it was a team that just battled injuries, and overall, I mean, the season was just uneventful. Like, Staley didn't have much to do. They weren't in a very good spot last year.
No, it was rough for him. So let's move into the offseason, because there was a lot that happened. So starting with the front office, The team gave the nod to Joe Hortiz to be the new GM for the franchise. He got his career start as a graduate assistant in Auburn, has been working his way up through the ranks with the Ravens franchise since 1998, most recently as director of player personnel. So he takes over at the GM position. From the coaching staff, just before that hire, obviously the Chargers had launched into their next head coach in the form of former Michigan Wolverine head coach Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh was obviously highly touted. Many other teams were looking at him, but Harbaugh chose LA as his next destination as he moves on from college. Harbaugh brings with him a refreshed coaching staff as well, including former Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator Greg Roman, who is now the team's OC. He also brought a familiar face with him. His defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, who was with him at the University of Michigan, has joined Harbaugh in his shift to the NFL and is now the team's defensive coordinator. Player personnel wise, we saw some changes, starting with departures. Austin Eckler, Austin Johnson, Gerald Everett, Kenneth Murray Jr., and cornerback Michael Davis all found new homes. They did sign several new players, including defensive end Bud Dupree, receiver DJ Chark, Denzel Perryman, who's a linebacker, a couple new running backs, and Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who are both coming from the Ravens to L.A. with Greg Roman. And defensive lineman Puna Ford, who I just wanted to give a shout out to because I actually coached him when he played for the Hilton Head Island Gators back when he was a kid. Good kid, solid defensive lineman. Last thing here, as far as offseason goes, is the NFL draft. They definitely made the most of their draft in an attempt to fill gaps left by departing players and strengthen their depth. Starting with the offensive line, the team used their number 5 pick to select offensive tackle Joe Alt from Notre Dame. The team also brought in wide receiver Ladd McConkey from Georgia, linebacker Junior Colson from Michigan, cornerbacks Tarheeb Still from Maryland and Cam Hart from Notre Dame, and wide receivers Brendan Rice from USC and Cornelius Johnson from Michigan, among others. Jake, what do you think is the biggest impact move here when looking at all the Chargers action this offseason? And how do you think this offense is going to look under Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh's approach to offense, which is definitely different than Brandon Staley?
Yeah, definitely. I think Harbaugh might really be the biggest impact for the Chargers. He's been a successful coach everywhere he's been. I think he's going to come in and he's going to fix the issues they've had with the running game. I love that they drafted Joe Alt to go along with that to help that cause, which will only help Herbert then in the play action game. Like I think overall with what Harbaugh does, I think it sets them up for a lot more success. I'm actually pretty big on the offseason moves for the Chargers. I like what they've done here.
All right, well, let's take a look at this depth chart. So taking a look at things, obviously starting at the top, we still got Justin Herbert at quarterback. They do have Gus Edwards currently sitting at the 1 spot. Receivers definitely look different. Keenan Allen's gone. Mike Williams is gone. So their starting 3 is Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, and DJ Chark. Will Dissly is playing the tight end position now in replacement of Gerald Everett. On the defensive side of the ball, we already talked about Puna Ford. Joey Bosa is still there. Denzel Perryman is going to be one of those inside linebackers. It's going to be new. They still have Khalil Mack. And then obviously we already talked a little bit about some of these other key guys in the secondary, and Asante Samuel and Derwin James. Anything here particularly stick out to you?
I just think that, they have talent all over the field, essentially. I love, like I said, that they have 2 Knowles in the secondary. And I've even read some stuff that Derwin is getting some offensive looks in training camp, which I don't know if that'll be something that is real or if it's just something they're doing in camp to have fun, but we'll see what happens with that. A lot of new additions on offense are going to be the key to the team's success this season, just to see how they gel with and also even a new coach with Harbaugh.
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a look at the schedule here. So they kick the season off Sunday, September 8th at home against the Raiders. And then they hit the road for a 2-game stretch, first playing in Carolina and then traveling to Pittsburgh to play either against Russell Wilson or Justin Fields and the Steelers. They travel back home Sunday, September 29th to play the Chiefs before they end up with a week 5 bye. So this is one of those teams that has a really early bye week. The rest of their season, taking a look at that, they're at Denver, at Arizona. Then they return home to play the Saints, hit the road again to play a tough team in Cleveland. Then they have a 3-game road stretch. They play, home stretch. They're playing the Titans, the Bengals, and the Ravens all at home. And that Ravens game is going to be one of the Monday night games on November 25th. Then they hit the road on a 2-game stretch to play the Falcons and the Chiefs. Return home to play the Bucks and then the Broncos. And then the last 2 games they have of the year, are at New England and at Vegas. Division odds are plus 350. Their over under is 8.5. Where do you have these guys sitting at the end of the year?
Yeah, the NFL did them no favors with 4 back-to-back road spots. That's crazy. That's probably the highest in the NFL. I do know. I mean, they get a 3-game home stretch too, but that's also with Cincinnati and then on a Monday night against his brother with Baltimore. So I mean that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
I think I might surprise you here. I've got the Chargers at 11-6. I've got them going over 8.5 at -144. 11-win season.
11-win season. That is impressive. And I had a feeling you probably had these guys a little bit up there, but I didn't know if it was going to be 11-6. I've got them one less game. I've got them sitting at 10-7, 3-3 in the division. So I still have them sitting behind the Chiefs, but I do have them taking a substantial step forward over what their team looked like last year. All right, let's dive into the next team here, which is the Denver Broncos. It was really a year of inconsistency and missed opportunities for the Broncos in 23. Season began with a disappointing 1-5 start, which was their worst since 1994. One of those losses was 70-20 in Miami against the Dolphins, which could have very easily been the most points scored in a game had Mike McDaniel not pulled back on the throttle in that game in the fourth. Team found their footing in week 7. However, they went on a 5-game winning streak to bring their record to 6-5 after their week 12 win over the Cleveland Browns. Unfortunately for the Broncos fans, the team did hit an end of season backslide. They lost 4 of their last 6, finishing the year 8-9, suffering their 7th consecutive losing season and missing the playoffs for the 8th straight year. The team had occasional flashes on offense, but a struggle to generate turnovers and stop opposing offenses just proved too much to overcome for the team from Mile High. The Broncos finished 14th on offense and 31st on defense in PFF rankings, landed 19th on points scored and 27th in points allowed. Jake, what were your thoughts on the season for the 23 Broncos?
Kind of just how you started it. Very inconsistent. I mean, they did have a stretch where they beat the Packers, Chiefs, Bills, and Browns. Like that's a huge stretch for that team. Like those are very good wins. And at the time, that probably saved their defensive coordinator Vance Joseph's job. But for as bad as they were, I mean, they were still very close to being a wild card team.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising, especially sitting at 8-9. Let's talk about their offseason a little bit here. No major changes for the Broncos in the front office or coaching staff. They did say goodbye to a couple of key pieces, most importantly, safety Justin Simmons, who was there for 6 or 7 years. He was released on March 7th. And QB Russell Wilson, who obviously they threw a ton of money at. That contract was terminated March 4th, and he was subsequently released on March 13th. Center Lloyd Cushenberry, defensive end Jonathan Harris, linebacker Josie Jewell, and cornerback Fabian Moreau are among others who found new homes. Player signings wise, the team brought in a few new faces, including wide receiver Josh Reynolds, defensive tackle Malcolm Roach, cornerback Levi Wallace, linebacker Cody Barton, safety Brandon Jones, and linebacker Andre Smith, to name a few. Denver went heavy on trying to address needs on the offensive side of the ball in the draft, starting with selecting their quarterback of the future at pick 12 when they selected Oregon quarterback Bo Nix with their first round selection. The team also grabbed Nix's teammate Troy Franklin, a wide receiver from the Ducks, in the 4th round. They also selected Audric Estime, running back from Notre Dame, to step in and support the run game. Utah defensive end Jonah Ellis and Mizzou cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain are a couple other selections that the team made in the 24 NFL draft. Jake, biggest impact here, and how do you feel about the Bo Nix pick at 12? What you think he'll be able to do in Peyton's offense? Obviously, looking at the depth chart right now, they've got Stidham in QB1, but I don't know how long that's going to happen.
Yeah, and they kind of just said it was a formality that all the rookies were being placed lower on the depth chart when their first depth chart came out. So we'll still see if Nix is the starter or not. But anyone who listens to our college episodes or even the draft special, if you tuned into that, probably can figure out I'm not a fan of Bo Nix at all. I'm really interested to see how it plays out with him and Sean Payton. I do not foresee a lot of success, honestly, for this team. I don't see Bo Nix as an NFL quarterback. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but there's nothing that I've seen with arm talent. I mean, yeah, he can move a little bit, but you've got to be able to do way more than that in the NFL. So I'm not holding out too much hope for success here.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at this depth chart because it does look a little bit different than last year. Obviously, we talked about Stidham. There's a definite possibility that Bo Nix is going to be QB1 by week one. Javante Adams returns here to continue to be running back one for the Broncos. Cortland Sutton is also still in a Broncos uniform. He is their number one receiver. We've got Marvin Mims Jr. and former Detroit Lion Josh Reynolds rounding out the top three wide receivers. Adam Troutman is their starting tight end. Taking a look at their defense, they don't have a lot of big name guys here. Obviously, Patrick Surtain is there. They've got Cody Barton, who's going to be a new player in the team. John Franklin Myers has been able to be serviceable at times. But overall, looking at the depth chart here, what are your thoughts on how this team looks?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I do like them adding Josh Reynolds. He's a huge loss for us. He was a key role player in our wide receiver room. But just overall in general, it's just a lot of unproven guys all over the roster. They're gonna have to have a lot of guys step up, I think, to have success.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's take a look at the schedule. So they're going to kick their season off on the road against Seattle. So they are going to be traveling to play the Seahawks Sunday, September 8th. They return home the following week to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then they have a 2-game road stretch where they play the Bucks and the Jets. Return home for 2 weeks to play first the Las Vegas Raiders and then the LA Chargers. Hit the road again to play the New Orleans Saints before returning home to play the Panthers. A really tough 2-game stretch on the road, playing at Baltimore and then at Kansas City before they return home Sunday, November 17th to play the Falcons. Hit the road again to play the Raiders before they return home on Monday, December 2nd in a Monday Night Football game against the Browns. Their bye week is week 14, so super late in the season for them. The last 4 games of the season for them, they are playing at home against the Colts, then a 2-game road trip, first to the Chargers, and then to go play Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And then their last game of the season is back home against Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. Plus 2,000 on these division odds. Over under on wins is 5.5. Jake, where do you have these guys sitting at the end of the year?
Yeah, that schedule's tough. That's a tough schedule for a shitty team. 5.5 is the win total. Let's sail under here. We're going 3-14 at -120.
3-14. All right. I got them playing a little bit better than that, but I still have them in the under as well. I've got them sitting at 5-12 by the end of the year. So we'll see what happens with the Denver Broncos as we move forward. All right. Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. 23 season was really a tale of two halves. The first half of the season was marked by inconsistency and struggles on both sides of the ball. Team started their season 3-5 through the first 8 games, but what was most glaring was less about what was on the field and more about what was going on off the field. Reports were swirling that there was a pretty significant disconnect between the players and head coach Josh McDaniels, and that all came to a head in the week leading up to the Raiders' Week 8 loss to the Lions. So echoes around the NFL were that the Raiders personnel were reporting that McDaniels had appeared distant and not himself in the days leading up to what would be his final day as a Raider. According to reports from Jay Glazer, that aloofness turned into Festivus in late October for those Seinfeld fans.
Newcomers.
Don't know if this audio is going to play or not.
Begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it. You.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely an airing of grievances where players from the top down unloaded on McDaniels, sharing feelings that he was there in body but not in spirit. In an attempt to save some face and regain the locker room, McDaniels asked then linebacker coach Antonio Pierce to get up and speak on behalf of him at the end of the meeting with the players. But that did not work out as planned because part of Pierce's motivational speech included a reference to his old Giants teams upsetting the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl, which obviously pissed off Josh McDaniels, as he was the Patriots' longtime offensive coordinator at that time. That meeting reportedly broke McDaniels completely, and soon after, the word of clashing made its way to haircut expert Mark Davis, who sided with Pierce's message and quickly fired McDaniels, naming Pierce as the interim successor for the remainder of the year. As if firing the head coach wasn't enough, the Raiders also made the call to fire their GM Dave Ziegler and offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi, and the final domino to fall was that of Jimmy Garoppolo, who was demoted to backup status, promoting rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell to the starting position for the rest of the year. Perhaps that wasn't the worst move, though, as the Raiders went from 3-5 in their first 8 to 5-4 in their final 9. Unfortunately for the Raiders, that upswing came a little bit too late as the team finished the season 8-9, which was good for second in the division, but not enough for a playoff spot. The team finished 17th on offense and 9th on defense in PFF rankings while finishing 23rd in points and 9th in points allowed. Jake, what are your thoughts on all the craziness that happened with the Raiders in 2023?
First, I have to say, I watch a lot of football, and I've never seen this mascot in my life. This thing almost looks fake. Like, what is this thing? This thing's absolutely ridiculous. A lot of stuff going on in the building obviously is never a good thing for a team when you're not winning. The team had a lot of talent. They just lacked a good quarterback and a head coach. I think making the change to Pierce really is going to help the cause. As we saw at the end of the year last year, they just came up a bit short.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of these off-season moves here, guys. We did see some changes in the Raiders front office, most importantly at the GM position. We talked about it earlier, how Ziegler was fired along with Josh McDaniels, and Ziegler was supplanted by interim GM Champ Kelly for the remainder of the year. But instead of giving the interim role to Kelly in a full-time capacity, the team took a different approach and actually grabbed Tom Telesco, who had just recently been let go by the Chargers after 10 seasons with the franchise. In terms of the coaching staff, interim head coach Antonio Pierce was obviously given the full-time position. This is really after Max Crosby and a lot of the other Raiders players were extremely vocal about retaining him for the role. Pierce made two significant selections to his coaching staff, starting with hiring Super Bowl champion and seasoned NFL coach Marvin Lewis to join him as the new assistant head coach. In addition, Pierce made a change at the offensive coordinator position after Bo Hardigree previously held the role in an interim capacity for Pierce back on the back half of 23. Now steps in Luke Getsy, who was most recently the offensive coordinator for Justin Fields on the Chicago Bears. Player departure-wise, Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh Jacobs headline those player departures. Jimmy G headed to LA to play for the Rams. Josh Jacobs obviously headed out to Green Bay. Cornerback Amik Robertson and tight end Austin Hooper are a couple other guys that found new homes. Player signings, Silver and Black brought in some new names, starting with the QB position in Gardner Minshew, who joins the Raiders after a serviceable season filling in for Anthony Richardson last year in Indy. Defensive tackle Christian Watkins, defensive tackle Adam Butler, defensive tackle John Jenkins, center Cody Whitehair, and offensive tackle Andrus Peat are some other names that have joined the Raiders franchise. And finally, in the draft, the Raiders found multiple new players to step in and make an immediate impact, starting with their first round selection in Georgia tight end Brock Bowers with the 13th overall pick. In the second round, the team drafted Oregon center Jackson Powers Johnson, Maryland offensive tackle Delmar Glaze, Ohio State linebacker Tommy Eichenberg, and Air Force safety Trey Taylor are a couple other names that they selected in the draft. Jake, biggest impact here, and how do you think Pierce is going to do in his first full season as Raiders' new head coach?
So to me, Christian Wilkins is the obvious biggest impact. Pairing him with Max Crosby that's ridiculous. That's what every offense in the NFL is going to have to be focused on trying to stop. I mean, that's a deadly combination. Pierce should have a respectable first full season as head coach, I think. There's a lot of talent on this team. I do think they're still lacking some in a few key places. And I'm really interested to see how they pair Brock Bowers with Notre Dame tight end Michael Mayer that they drafted the previous year. It's an interesting combination there also. So, I mean, they've got talent in a lot of places. They are lacking some, obviously, but I think this team could have some success.
Yeah, and let's take a look at this depth chart here. I mean, they definitely have some key names on both sides of the ball, starting with the offense. Obviously, right now, we've got Gardner Minshew as the starter. That could definitely change because the team was obviously high on Aiden O'Connell last year. Zamir Wright steps in to lead the running back room after Josh Jacobs' departure. Wide receiver Devontae Adams is still in Vegas at the moment. We've got Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker rounding out the top three receivers, with Brock Bowers is currently listed as tight end number 1 for the Raiders. We'll see what kind of time split we're going to see there with him and Mayer. On the defensive side of the ball, Max Crosby, obviously one of the best defensive players in the league. Christian Watkins' pickup is huge. I think he was top 5, top 7 free agent in the offseason this year. So a big pickup for the Raiders. And they've also got a couple guys here like Mark Epps, Trayvon Moyrig, and some guys like that. So taking a look at the depth chart here, Jake, what do you like or dislike?
Just to correct real quick, it's Christian Wilkins. You've called him Watkins twice. Just
Wilkins.
So everyone knows. Yeah, it's all right.
I'm just making sure you're paying attention.
The back 7 on D is my question. That leaves a lot to be desired in that back 7. And then we also, like you just mentioned, is Gardner the answer at quarterback? I'm not big on him or Aiden O'Connell. And with that, I don't know. When you have Devontae Adams, I feel like maybe you should probably get someone who can get him the ball consistently, especially with they're going to have threats with Jacoby Myers now. And if they could put Bowers and Mayer on the field together, like there's going to be weapons all over the field. Gardner, I'm just not sure. I mean, yeah, he's had serviceable time in the NFL, but he's just not that take you to the next level quarterback, especially in a division that has Patrick Mahomes. So that's where I kind of worry about this team a little bit.
Yeah, so speaking of worrying about the team, let's look at this schedule because this is just I feel like every schedule we look at, we're like, this is brutal.
I know.
So starting off for the Raiders is a 2-game road stretch. They are traveling to LA to play the Chargers, and then they go all the way across the other side of the country to play the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Their first home game is week 3 against the Carolina Panthers, and then they stay at home for week 4 to play the Browns. Hit the road in week 5 to play the Denver Broncos before returning home and playing the Steelers. They hit the road again to go play the Rams in LA before returning home to host Kansas City and Pat Mahomes. Hit the road again Sunday, November 3rd to play the Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals before their week 10 bye. They round out the rest of their season at Miami, home against Denver, at KC, at Tampa Bay. The Falcons and both playing at home. Saints, and then back home for the last game of the year to play the Chargers. Plus 900 division odds, and over under is 6.5. Where do you have these guys sitting, Jake?
I mean, that schedule, that's unbelievable. Like, I don't know. These schedules are, you're right. Every time we look at one, we're like, my God, this is crazy. This one's crazy. So 6.5 is the over under. I've actually got a little bit of success here. I mean, it's minus 138, I think, for a reason. I mean, I think they're obviously picking them to go over 6 is pretty logical. I actually have them as high as 9-8. So I got them 9-8, which is way over the 6.5 at minus 138.
All right, I've got them just over, but I don't have them at plus 500. So we'll see what this team looks like throughout the year. This is another situation where I look at the schedule and I'm like, man, like they back and forth with all this travel. It's not like they have a couple weeks to be able to sit in Vegas and kind of catch their breath. Like they are hitting the road almost every other week, and a couple of these are back to backs. It's just seems like a lot of travel, but we'll see what happens with the Raiders as we move into 2024. All right, guys, let's talk about the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. It was another banner year for the team in 23 with their 11th season under coach Andy Reid. The Chiefs entered the season as defending Super Bowl champions and had equally high expectations for the new year, returning a majority of their key pieces on both sides of the ball. Team started the season hot, going 6-1 in the first 7 games. They did hit a bit of a midseason skid, losing 2 of 4 in their following 6 and taking the team to 8-5 as they went into week 15. But managed to right the ship on the tail end of the season, winning 3 of their last 4, finishing the season 11-6, ranking 12th on offense and tied for 15th on defense in PFF rankings, while finishing 15th in points scored and 2nd in points allowed. Their record made it their 11th straight winning season and 8th straight year as the AFC West champs. That 11-6 record was not enough for a first-round bye or home field advantage, though. So the team had a rough path as repeating the Super Bowl champs. But as has been the case for the Chiefs in recent years, they show up and make plays when it counts. Starting with the wild card round, the Chiefs hosted the injury-riddled Miami Dolphins in their lone home playoff game. They won that one 26-7 in one of the coldest games in NFL history. The following week, the Chiefs traveled to Buffalo to play the Bills, where it would take all 4 quarters to secure that victory. An 8-play, 75-yard drive culminated at the top of the 4th with a 4-yard touchdown run by Isaiah Pacheco, secured the win for the Chiefs, and then that obviously headed them to the AFC title game for the 6th straight year. Next stop for the Chiefs was Baltimore to play Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. The Ravens offense seemed virtually unstoppable for the better part of the year, but nod here to Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo. He had the Lamar Jackson cheat code. They stuck with their signature pressure heavy defensive scheme, blitzed Jackson 20 times for 4 sacks. The Chiefs held Baltimore to 3 of 4-11 on third down conversions and held them to 10 total points while dominating time of possession by over 15 minutes. That led to a 17-10 win, clinching KC's 4th Super Bowl berth in the last 5 years. Super Bowl 58 was the next and final stop for the Chiefs, who traveled to Vegas to face off against the NFC champion 49ers in a rematch of Super Bowl 54. In a game that turned out to be one for the record books, the Chiefs really traded blows with the Niners throughout the entire game, and it took all of overtime to decide the game, as the Chiefs took a 13-play, 75-yard drive to score a touchdown with 3 seconds left in overtime to secure their second straight and fourth total Super Bowl victory. Jake, what were your thoughts on the performance of the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023?
Well, I mean, you just said all of that without mentioning the best thing about the 2023 Chiefs.
Are you ready
Did
for
that
it?
for a reason. Go ahead.
Taylor Swift was the best thing about the 2023 Chiefs. It was a typical Chiefs season. I mean, there was a slump somewhere in the season, which they always do. They kind of lacklusterly play through games and beat people. They have the best coach in the NFL with the best player in the NFL and the biggest star in the world rooting them on. I mean, it's going to be hard to match what they did last season coming into this season, but they're the Chiefs. So, I mean, until they prove us wrong, this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Not much else to say there. We've got some good graphics here. I threw that up intentionally for you to be able to make your comment about your girl. So yeah, let's move into some offseason stuff here. So no major changes for the Chiefs, either in the front office or the coaching staff. A few players did move on from the franchise. Nick Allegretti, guard, safety Mike Edwards, linebacker Willie Gay, running back Jerick McKinnon, tackle Donovan Smith, and wide receiver MVS, to name a few. The team also did trade cornerback L'Jarius Sneed and a 7th-round pick to the Tennessee Titans for Tennessee's 2024 7th and their 2025 3rd-round selections. Some new faces on the Chiefs include punter Matt Ariza, wide receiver Marquise Hollywood Brown, safety Tyree Gillespie, tight end Irv Smith Jr., and quarterback Carson Wentz, who now looks to back up Pat Mahomes. NFL draft, they had a couple notable selections as well, including Texas wide receiver Xavier Worthy, BYU offensive tackle Kingsley Suamataya, I hope is how I'm saying that correctly, and TCU tight end Jared Wiley, among others. Jake, biggest impact move here, looking at the Chiefs, and let's just throw it out there. Do you think this team is poised for a three-peat?
So losing Snead is huge. I think that is a big deal. I really do like them bringing in Xavier Worthy. I like him even more than Hollywood Brown. To me, obviously, we're going to have a little bit of questions in the secondary now with Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson. They have experience, but like statistically, I mean, they haven't done anything fantastic. So it's going to be interesting to see how they gel and how they play now that they're expected to step up as the 1 and 2. Going with the three-peat question, I think we've already answered this. Like we can't doubt this team until they give us reason. So yeah, I think a three-peat is very possible with this team.
Yeah. Defense. I mean, you kind of talked through the depth chart there a little bit. I definitely have more questions on the defensive side than the offensive side of the ball, but for what it's worth, this offensive team looks better, I think, than what it did last year. In some ways, like Pacheco, another year under his belt, being RB1, having Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown, and Xavier Worthy as the top 3 wide receiver targets, and then adding Travis Kelce to that mix for Pat Mahomes. That's going to spell trouble for a lot of teams. It's going to be another great year, I think, for Kansas City. Let's take a look at the schedule. They've don't have an easy schedule, just like we say with every damn team we cover here. But they start the season off on Thursday night to play the Baltimore Ravens in Kansas City. They stay home in week 2 to play the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Then they hit the road for a 2-game stretch to play the Falcons and the Chargers before returning home for a Monday night matchup against the Saints. The Chiefs' bye week is week 6, so a little bit early in the season. Coming back from bye week, they have a 2-game road stretch, first against the 49ers and then against the Raiders. They return home for 2 games to play the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Denver Broncos before another 2-game stretch where they play the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo and then travel to Charlotte to play the Carolina Panthers. A 2-game home stretch after that, including a Friday night game against the Raiders in Kansas City. And then they also host the LA Chargers in Sunday, December 8th. And then they have the last 4 games. 3 of the 4 of these are road games. They travel to Cleveland to play the Browns, which is not an easy place to play. They come back home to host CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans on December 21st. We talked about that game in our NCAA show, or will this week, because that is up against a lot of big college football playoff games. And then we round out the final 2 games of the season, regular season for the Chiefs, at Pittsburgh and at Denver. Minus 230 on the division odds. So clearly they're still the favorite here. Their over under is 11.5. For what it's worth, they are minus in both. So I think Vegas is a little up in the air on where this is going to land. But Jake, what are your thoughts? Where do you have these guys land at the end of the year?
So this schedule is interesting. We've got a Monday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. So they're playing every day of the week almost. And we've got 4 back-to-back road spots, which does match that team earlier. I think it was the Chargers. I talked about that too. So, this is a crazy schedule. They're all over the place here. I don't think this is going to come as a surprise at all. 11.5 is the over-under. Let me let Taylor introduce this one.
Are you ready for it?
15 wins, 15-2,
Woo!
Best team in the NFL, way over the 11.5.
Wow. Okay. All right. I didn't hear the Taylor Swift sound because it's going to be delayed for me for 3 minutes. So it'll undoubtedly play in the middle of a sentence here. But I do have them winning the AFC West, and I do have them over, but I do not have them only losing 2 games. I've got them sitting at 13-4. So a couple of games behind that. Still a very, very solid team here. It's just going to be another year of consistency. I don't know how this is going to get broken up so long as you have Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes teamed up together. They've already proven that they can plug and play a lot of different guys in here and get more out of them than what you would expect, which is why I'm not as concerned about this defense, even though I'm looking at it and there's a lot of names on here that, aren't particularly fancy. But yeah, I've got them in the over as well in winning the AFC West.
Yeah, I trust Spags with the defense and with what the offense. This offense is way better than last year's offense, so I think that's only going to help the cause. My worry about my 15-2 pick is, like I mentioned earlier, the Chiefs always have a part in the season where they just seem like they do not care. So I'm sure that will probably happen, and they'll lose a few more games. But I think over 11.5 should be one of the easiest locks in the NFL.
You would think. Vegas, for whatever reason, has a different viewpoint on it, but we'll see what happens. All right, guys, let's talk about some future bets here. We did triple check these before the show, so I didn't screw this up like I did last week. All of these should be in line with actual players that are on the team. Starting with the LA Chargers, we've got a couple different selection options here. Most regular season rookie receiving yards for Ladd McConkey at plus 1,000. Regular season coach of the year, Jim Harbaugh at plus 900. Make the playoffs at plus 112. Beat the Raiders twice at plus 200. And 5+ interceptions for Asante Samuel Jr. at plus 1,400. I have a feeling where you're going to go with this, Jake, but where you at?
Yeah, for the sake of money and for the sake of fun and rooting for one of my favorite players, let's go 5+ picks for Asante.
Yep, I had a feeling that's where that was coming. I actually do like that, notwithstanding the fact that he's one of your Knowles boys. I do also think that there is a possibility that Harbaugh may potentially get coach of the year. I don't know that he's going to necessarily be in a position to where he's going to win the AFC West, but I think that he can definitely flip-flop this team from what happened last year to this year. So I think that there's a possibility he may end up getting that, but I do like that Asante Samuel pick. Next up here for Denver, we've got most regular season rookie passing yards for Bo Nix at plus 480. Offensive rookie of the year, Bo Nix, plus 2,000. Most regular season kickoff return touchdowns, plus 1,400. I called that out specifically because they are first or second in the pool for this pick. So Vegas likes the odds for the Broncos to get some touchdown returns this year. 10+ receiving yards for Cortland Sutton at plus 500, and then 1 field goal or more in every regular season game for plus 2,200. Jake, where are you throwing money on?
Yeah, I actually like that field goal one, but there's bound to be a game where they don't hit one. But yeah, I would assume the most regular season kickoffs, return touchdowns. I like that because obviously they're ass, so they're probably gonna be returning a lot of kicks. So I think I'm gonna go with that one at the plus 1,400 again.
Okay, all right, I dig it. Let's move on to the Vegas Raiders here. So we've got most regular season sacks for Max Crosby at plus 900. Regular season defensive player of the year for Max Crosby at plus 1,000. Beat the Broncos twice, plus 180. 10+ receiving touchdowns for Devontae Adams at plus 220. And week 1 starting QB, Gardner Minshew at plus 110.
I would take all 5 of these. This is the first one I've seen that I like all of them. Yeah, there's not one of those that I really don't like. And Gardner at plus money to be the week 1 starter, I really like too. So yeah, I honestly like every single one of those.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Minshew was the plus on this, but for what it's worth, all of these look good. And Pierce is a defensive first guy. I think there's a real possibility that Max Crosby gets Defensive Player of the Year this year, playing in that bolstered defensive front, especially with Christian Wilkins added to the team. All right, let's take a look at the last team here. Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champs plus 600, AFC champs plus 350, Super Bowl winner plus regular season MVP, Chiefs plus Mahomes at plus 2,000, most regular season passing yards, Pat Mahomes at plus 700, and most regular season rookie receiving yards for Xavier Worthy at plus 1,400.
Man. Probably the Super Bowl champs at plus 600. I think that's the best money return right there. AFC champs at plus 350, I kind of like too, but I also have that Cincinnati theory, so I'm not sure I would. I think if they can get by Cincinnati, then I'd just like them to win the Super Bowl outright. So I think I'll take Super Bowl at plus 600.
Okay, yeah, I like that pick. All right, guys, that is it for AFC West coverage. We have one more to cover, and that's the NFC West, and then we will be done with division previews. We will go on to talk in a little bit more detail about who we think is going to win those divisions and what we're picking as far as playoffs and Super Bowls, all that fun stuff. But we only have a couple more weeks before we're jumping into the regular season here.
Who was the last quarterback to win a Super Bowl that wasn't Patrick Mahomes?
Would that be Mr. Matthew Stafford?
Oh, it would be leading into our NFC West preview next week. It's gonna be a fun one next week. I'm excited for that one.
Appreciate that Jason Williams lob up you just did. Yeah, so NFC West will be a fun one to cover for sure. Obviously, Jake being a big fan of the Rams and more specifically Matthew Stafford. We've got a really good team in the San Francisco 49ers, and the outside of maybe the Arizona Cardinals, like 3 of these 4 teams always play each other really, really well. I think Arizona is actually going to look a little bit better this year than they did last year, since they're going to have Kyler Murray the entire year. But still, I mean, Seattle Seahawks always play the Niners all the way to the end of the game. So it's a fun division to cover, and this is going to be the last division for us before we jump into, like I said, the playoff predictions, maybe cover some more future bets. And before you know it, we'll be at week 1. So that's it for us for the AFC West coverage, guys. We appreciate it. As always, please like, share, subscribe, comment. We're getting more and more comments from you guys. We really appreciate it. So please continue to do that. If we see anything that's funny or interesting to discuss, we'll definitely call that out. But for the fine citizen, Mr. Jacob Workman, this is Reese Downing, TNT Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NFL Edition, AFC West coverage, and we will see you guys next week.
See you, everyone.